It's Raquel. Welcome back to Recovery to Wellness, where survivors radiate badassery. It is currently May 29th, 2024, and I finally am doing this video book review number 6, and it's gonna be a doozy. I have just about almost finished the log review for this book. I had like 25 criticisms for this book. I think maybe 1 or 2 of them repeated a little bit, but like, yeah. I am reviewing How to Hygge, The Nordic Secrets to a Happy Life, which is a 2016 book. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Signe Johansson. This is all the flags that I had to deal with. Like, so many flags. I've done pretty much the backbones and pretty much all the writing portions except for the summary and like the book's impact on me kind of thing, and then what kept me reading. And then I have to proofread everything else and then just kind of, you know, add the little bit last bits, and then I'm gonna hopefully be posting it today, film this video review, and then I'm gonna jump to the library to return this book so that I can get it fully just like, you know, returned and then paid off, because I was accruing fines for it being late, because it was due in the beginning of May and it's now like the end of May, so it's a whole thing. I can't tell if you're in focus. Signe Johansson. It's time to talk about this book. Again, I don't have it scripted or anything, and I'm not really sure. I'm trying to get this back to the library before the library closes, and it's just like a whole thing. So yeah. I think you are lopsided, but I also think that's just how my tripod is. So we haven't gotten a new tripod yet. I mean, it still works, so yeah. Anywho, so this book. I read this book, oh gosh. That's definitely information that would be in my book blog review, which is the book exploration station. So the companion piece to this video book review is the BES, or book exploration station, on recoverytowellness.wordpress.com. I think I read it between March 2024 and May 2024. It's 206 pages. It's a non-fiction book. It has photographs and like photo spreads throughout, and then some other random photographs and stuff too. My recommendation score before page 168 is a 1 out of 5. That's how much I would recommend it, 5 being the best. And after page 168, it's a 0.5 out of 5, so it definitely took a hit. I have a lot of gripes with this book. It was a very like critical heavy book, I guess, for me. Like, just I had like 25 criticisms that I have typed up. Again, a couple of them repeat, but like predominantly like about 25 or so disagreements, disgruntlements. I was disgrumbled, I was triggered and like pissed, and just all of that. So the book is supposed to be about Nordic secrets to hygge. And hygge is like the definition of like essentially like togetherness and comfort and like community, conviviality, you know, kindness and such. Just kind of like coffee and like, you know, warmth and like all of that. So this is the second book on hygge that I've read. The first one I read, I actually was before I ever did video book reviews, because I've only been doing video book reviews this year in 2024. So the first one I read was, and I'm not going to pronounce this name right, but The Little Book of Hygge by Viking. So far superior hygge book. I own 2 other books on hygge that now, after reading this book, I'm a little bit more apprehensive that they might not be that good, but hopefully that's not the case. I also took out his book on Luca, but I never actually read it, so I really do want to read that sometime too. And I probably will eventually own his hygge book too, because I really love it. And it's always been like one of my all-time favorites, and I still like remember so much of the review. Not so much of the review itself, but so many things that I liked from the review. So when I once did that on my blog years ago, probably back in like 2016 or something. So This book was different in the sense that it talks about Hygge, I remember in the beginning it talked about how if mindfulness is the sort of looking into the self, Hygge is about looking outwards and having community and togetherness with other people. It was written pre-pandemic, so I don't know how much things would have changed post-pandemic. It does feel a little like, I felt, especially towards the end of the book, it brought up the idea of community and togetherness, which I felt was kind of like, if it was that important, it should have been in the beginning of the book rather than at the very end of the book. But it also doesn't give like tips of like how to socialize with people. It's just saying like seclusion is bad and like isolation is bad, but like it doesn't say like how can you get better at like improving your socialization skills or improving the meaningful relationships and connections you have with people, especially in real life people. Definitely lacks a lot of that, unfortunately, which I would have been super interested about. But again, didn't cover that, so kind of fell flat on that angle. It also has about 2 or 3 chapters worth of like recipes, like cooking and baking, and then also a whole chapter dedicated to alcoholic beverages, which I felt was like, it just limits the audience, I think. So I was kind of like disappointed by that. And then like there was also like just throughout the entire book, like even before 168, especially in the review process when I went to review this book, I was like definitely like, oh, so there were like warning signs of how she kind of is about the topic of mental health and about psychology and such. She just has a lot of like, I think it was a lot of like superiority and like, you know, nature's the best like, you know, way of exercising, because in the gym it's everything's super unsanitary and awful and like terrible, and like it's way better to exercise in nature rather than going to a gym. I don't understand why people would go to a gym. So like she was there were a lot of judgmental tones, and that was kind of off-putting for me. But I have a thing too where I like, if I start a book I have to finish it, and if I read a book I have to review it. So even when I got to 168 and I was like, I don't like this book anymore, I still like had to finish reading it. Like, I mean, I guess technically I could have not, but for me, like, I had to finish it, and I had to kind of, I don't know, I keep giving it a chance, right? Because then I'm like, okay, well, it can't get any worse, which it can, but you know, I just have to like finish reading it. Like, I try to be fair, I try to be like, okay, like I'm gonna give it another go, but it was definitely a difficult read once it hit 168. Before that, it was 1 out of 5, so it wasn't terrible. It wasn't like the best thing ever though, but like it wasn't like terrible. And like some of the recipes that I did like, that I include in photos in the written review, I actually liked this page. This had a really pretty photograph, so I really liked that. And that was on page 10. And then I have this first recipe for cardamom twists. And this image is in the review, which makes me want to do a video like adulting and stuff of making pretzels. I've never made pretzels before, but I think that'd be really cool. But this is like the image for the cardamom twists. I thought the white stuff was salt, which is what made me think of pretzels, but it's actually like sugar. Dark chocolate muffins. I think that'd be cool too. Why are you not focusing? And this is on page 75. Cardamom twists are on page 68 and 69. There's also, oh yes, nope, so this is a different one. But darkness and light on page 83, this recipe. And then I've taken pictures of it too, so like if I ever go and to start making these things, I'll like tell in a video and stuff. Like I'll go step by step and things like that. Yes, I like this one. This one looks really cool. Sticky ginger cake with a clementine glaze, and it's got like pomegranate seeds on it. That's on page 84. Roast cauliflower, spinach, and blue cheese salad with cherries and walnuts, page 114. And then I think the last one is Nordic coleslaw, which I really like German coleslaw. That's something my mom has made a few times, and I really, really enjoy it, so I think this might be worthy of. And as you can see too by me showing you these recipes, I also had a big problem with the size of font for this book, because it's all written in like 11-point font, and I felt like I felt like I could only read it through like a microscope. Not even like a you know, the bigger, not a monocle, but like you know, a magnifying glass. No, like a microscope, because it's written so tiny. And then the instructions are kind of written smaller too. And then if there's anything for like see the photograph on whatever, it's like even smaller. It's like, it's just a mess. Like an example. So like, see, there's like variations, which is a now gray font, which is like even smaller. And then it's like, oh, a little bit about the picture itself. Look how tiny that is. Like, I cannot read that. Like, I felt like I had to be like in the sun in order to read this book, and it's like super annoying. And then again, there's that whole chapter on alcoholic beverages, and then like only alcoholic beverages, which is too bad too, because I thought like some of them look really kind of cool and cute. They're all like alcoholic, so I don't know if there's like, there probably is like non-alcoholic versions of them, but I don't know how to make that or how to find any of that. It also talks about, I guess like in terms of mental health, it talks about eating disorders, like the trope of like, well, just don't think about your weight. And it's like, that's not, like, what do you mean, Johansson? Like, it's not, or like, you know, a depressed person, just be happy. And it's like, well, and then it's also like, there's a part at 168 where it was talking about, I can pull up the quote, I think, but it talks about how, oh, like, we're all like a little bit, we all hoard a little bit, right? Like, we're all a little bit of a hoarder, which is like, no. It was just so like, she does like research on like everything else but like mental health, which is like, I feel like arguably mental health is like a really important like conversation and like, you know, topic to talk about and to talk about well, in a sense. But she doesn't do that. Like I don't think she researched it at all, and she doesn't sound like she knows what she's talking about with it, because there's a lot of judgments, a lot of myths, a lot of misconceptions, and also like she like first of all too, like there was no, and then this is a companion video I'm making to this book review, is another video will be called Let's Talk About Trigger Warnings, because this book doesn't come with any trigger warnings. And if it had told me before I started reading it that it was going to talk about mental health and talk a lot about mental health stigma and like just misconceptions and myths and like perpetuating stigma and judgments and stuff like that, I never would have read the book. But it didn't tell me that it would involve that. So I'm like, oh yeah, Hygge, like I love Hygge, and like I want to go into reading that and stuff. And then it's like, oh, by the way, here's a whole bunch of stuff about mental health that I don't know enough about. Oh, like why focus on your body and trying to get skinny? You should just not do that. And it's like, that's not like what the whole thing is. Or let's just have a whole entire chapter about alcoholic beverages, or a whole like section of the book where it's like, oh well, hoarding is bad and being messy and like having too much clutter is not beautiful. And it's like, why? I don't like, it was super frustrating. And again, if it had come with a trigger warning that it was going to mention mental health, I would have been like, okay, nope, I would have like set it aside and not read the book. But it didn't come with that, and so it was just completely out of left field, and it was like, oh, let's talk about mental health, but I don't know enough about the subject matter myself, so here's some like perpetuating of stigma. Like, it just makes it really like, she talked at one point too, like when it kind of went into like the hoarding thing, she was like, oh yeah, like we all hoard a little bit, and it's like, that's not hoarding disorder is not an adjective for just for to describe yourself, in a sense, right? Like, that's being like, oh, we're all a little OCD. Like, no, that's not. OCD is a mental health disorder. It's a whole, you know, disorder, and it's distressing and it's debilitating, and it can be it can be severe, and it's definitely serious. So her sort of making light of it is just super, I felt it was super just aggravating, and also just incredibly triggering and super disheartening, because again, if she had told me that it was going to touch on mental health, I would never have read the book, which is also what I'm going to talk about in the Let's Talk About Trigger Warnings video, because it's like, the purpose of a trigger warning is to be like, hey, it gives you, the reader, or the audience member, the choice, do I want to continue reading this thing? Yes, I actually do want to continue reading it, or do I want to step away and be like, nope, not right now, not today. Like, give me that choice, though. If you don't present the warning at all, then I can't make that choice with, you know, good thought process in mind. And then, therefore, it takes away my ability to be able to maybe naturally handle it as well as I could, in a sense. Especially if I'm early on in my recovery, too. Like, you don't know, you just don't know, like, in all the stuff. And, like, I think, too, trigger warnings there's no one can trigger warn every single thing out there, because so many traumas can be very specific. Like if I dealt with someone of a trauma that always wore a yellow shirt, I can't necessarily go out and ban all yellow shirts, right? That's not quite the point. But it's like, okay, you know, this kind of topic of something that's a hot potato, so something that can, like homicide or suicide or whatever, right? Assaults and stuff. That's pretty broad enough that we can all reasonably agree, yeah, that's you know, triggering. That can be a difficult topic that brings a lot of trauma stuff with it. And so trigger warning is sort of like a respect kind of thing. It's kind of like a responsibility kind of thing too, where it's like, okay, hey, you can't avoid it necessarily in real life, but this is content, which is different. You have a choice in the content, whether or not you want to watch it or whether or not you don't want to. And like, it always makes me like flabbergasted when people on the internet are like, well, if you don't like it, don't read it, or if you don't like it, don't watch it. But it's like, how will I know if I don't like it if I don't watch or read it? Like, I had to, like, and especially if you don't warn me about it, then I can't know. I can't make a conscious, rational decision if you leave out giant important bits of information. So that's my rant on like the mental health portion of this book, because it does touch on it, and it's really aggravating because she researches and like references other people's like stuff so much for every other thing, but when it came to psychology and mental health, she was like, yeah, we're all a little OCD. And it's like, that's not what it is. Like, no. And like, it's just super frustrating. So I also felt really disheartened too, because it wasn't trigger warned appropriately. I felt like just walking blind into something, and like, it just took away my choice. Like, if I can't even expect a book on Hygge, which should have nothing to do with mental health, like, or if it does touch on mental health, it either warns me about it or touches on it well enough, in a sense, then, like, what other things can I be, like, you know, disheveled by, in a sense. So that's my biggest gripe on the book, especially hitting 168, page 168, but even before then there were some things, and then there's other things afterward too, where she's just, I feel the author is just very judgmental. I mean, she talks a lot too about how like we Nordics, and like, I don't know if she just like overgeneralizes it, she doesn't use that many I statements in a sense, to be like, this is my opinion, rather than this is all the Nordics' opinion, and it's like, I don't know, but she talked about like how she doesn't like carpets, and Nordics don't like carpets, and like how unsanitary they are and stuff, and it was like, okay, whatever. But, and then again, the last like couple of chapters were like about like community and stuff and furniture. She talked about furniture a lot, but she didn't share a lot of photos of furniture, which I think was a missed opportunity, because she could have done so much more with it, but instead she just focused on the 11-point font size text, which is just so tiny. We only have a few more minutes. So yeah, I'm gonna do a whole video on just talking about trigger warnings and like all of that, because that's a whole other thing. Some things that did positively come out of this book, I definitely enjoyed in the beginning where she talked about nature and like how going outdoors was helpful, and like even just kind of coming up with like, you know, the Nordics talk about how, you know, they don't always have like, you know, sometimes it's really cold, like really, you know, dark winters and stuff, so like even just making it a point to kind of go out and still like engage in nature and exercise in nature, even if it's not necessarily the best weather out, like how that's still valuable. So then something I started doing when I started reading this book was I started to walk from the library to a Dunkin', and then just kind of walk back and forth, like not like repeatedly, but like walk from the library to the Dunkin', get a coffee, walk back to the library, and then go inside the library. Like, I started picking up that habit, which was great. So that was beneficial. And then also I really want to make smoothies. I would love to make some smoothies. And then I also want to make pretzels and stuff too. Another thing positive that I got out of this book, I mean, definitely like there was a lot of like interesting recipes and stuff. Like, there's some things that like I showed you guys that I want to try. A lot more that I think is kind of more out of my depth for how I am right now as a cook, which is non-existent. Haven't cooked many things or baked many things. But it was interesting. That was interesting. And like, oh, there's also a section in the book review that I do about just the different kinds of references that I want to, like other things that were referenced in her book that I want to read. So there's like about a 4 or 5, maybe 6 list of that. Sapiens is actually one of them, and I've been seeing that at the library a lot more lately. Also, I think I mentioned this in the review, the written review, but also, like, I would have respected her a lot more if she would have just come out and been like, I don't know enough about mental health, so I'm not going to talk on it. Like, that would have been way more respectful, I think. and something I would have respected her more for. Like, I don't have enough expertise in this field, so I'm just gonna not. Like, instead of being like, I don't have expertise in this field, but I'm gonna talk shit about it anyway. Like, no. Win some, lose some, I guess, right? I think that pretty much wraps up the book pretty well, or at least this video review. Any final thoughts I have on this book? I am so excited to just be finally done with it. I can just wipe my hands clean and I'll be done and it's gone and I don't have to think about it again, and like I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to like, because I've been putting off, I put off when I got to 168, I was almost finished with the book because it was like only 206 pages, so I only had like maybe 30-40 pages left, but then I got triggered and then I was like, fuck, and then I was like, so I waited a few days before I could go back to it and then I could finish the book. And then during the whole review process I've been like, you know, there were so many flags in it. There was like, I think I had like 55 flags in this book, and then I'm like, so I kept avoiding it, I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and procrastinating and all this kind of stuff. And finally I've gotten myself to be like, okay, I'm gonna like, you know, because I wrote most of the review process, honestly, in this notebook, I wrote most of it, which I've just finished typing up, so I just have to do the final edits and stuff with it. But I wrote most of it, hand wrote most of it, and it was just a lot of work and a lot to say and a lot to do with it, and I'm really excited to just be able to return it today. It'll be so nice. And I'm gonna put it into this pile. So this is the official look of the pile. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for listening to me rant, because I really need to get that rant out. I've been holding that in for a while. And yeah, any thoughts, any criticisms of my criticisms, or viewpoints of my criticisms, or even like the written review itself, let me know in the comments. And I'm gonna be getting some actual like content out again soon. I know I've been doing a lot of like haul videos and stuff, but like I really want to probably get some meatier concepts, and I've definitely filmed a few of them. I just didn't feel like dealing with all of it. My voice is going, so I'm gonna head out. Thank you so much for watching. As always, stay safe, much love and light to you, and I will see you in another video very soon. And just thanks so much. And are there any books that you have loathed, and did you finish it or did you not finish it? And what's a book that you recommend? Because I do still want to do that pitch of an idea of an online book club kind of thing. So, alright, thank you so much. Bye. Guiding like a lighthouse to I will leave the light on.